All right, in this section, we're going to talk about stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination, and talk about how each of these kind of acts in a different context and how they all kind of interact with each other. So first, let's look at stereotypes. So stereotypes are really more the cognitive component of beliefs of someone else. And so this is looking at our beliefs or how we classify or organize people into groups and what views we have of those groups. Oftentimes, stereotypes are viewed in a negative connotation or have negative connotation to them, and we view different groups of people in these negative lights. We can also oftentimes ascribe these beliefs to groups of people based solely on some identifying factor that is oftentimes not actually related to the stereotype that we are ascribing it to. Now, not only do we look at the negative effect of stereotypes on other groups of people, but we can also fall victim to what's called stereotype threat, which affects our own beliefs about ourselves. And in falling victim to this, we can end up limiting our own performance in some activity. So maybe we end up believing, whether consciously or subconsciously, in the stereotype about ourselves, and ultimately then reduce our abilities to do whatever that stereotype might be about us. When in reality, we shouldn't ascribe to those beliefs, again, whether consciously or subconsciously, and in turn could actually perform better in whatever it is we are looking at that belief in the context of. Next, let's look at prejudice, which is really more the affect side of this equation, or so looking at how our affects or our attitudes are actually viewed towards other groups of people. Again, prejudice is focusing on sort of negative affects or hate towards other groups and how we view those groups of people in some context. Again, these are negative in nature and oftentimes transcend sort of the larger group as a whole and look solely at some individual characteristic or criteria that we then ascribe those beliefs or those attitudes towards the group as a whole. Oftentimes, these are learned from other people in our social groups, and we pick these up and sort of believe them ourselves. Finally, we have discrimination, which is really the behavioral component of this, where we see some behavioral outcome that is directed by stereotypes or prejudice towards a group or an individual. And so when we talk about discrimination, we can talk about or try to explain why this might happen. And so we have a few different theories of why discrimination happens. And maybe by understanding these theories, we can help to work to reduce discrimination in general. So the first theory is the scapegoat theory, and this looks at the idea of providing a scapegoat or someone lesser than us to ascribe our negative attitudes towards. So we might target someone with less power or less ability and use this as a way to offload these negative connotations or problems that we might have onto someone else. Then we have the realistic conflict theory, and this really looks at this idea of limited resources. And so maybe we have discrimination take place because we are competing for resources and we have these limited resources. So we look to compete with other groups of people for these resources that are available. So it creates this sort of in-group and out-group where we work together with our in-group to acquire resources and compete against our out-group because we have this belief that there aren't enough resources for everyone. And then finally, we can look at the theory of mutual interdependence, which really looks to help reduce discrimination and argues that we can work together towards a common goal, again, to reduce discrimination and negative attitudes towards others.